Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the TraxionGG podcast, where we talk about racing games, sim racing and racing esports. Today we're going to be discussing the future of the Formula 1 games, both the EA Sports driving title and the Frontier Developments management title. To do that, we are joined by Dave Gaming, a German YouTuber with over 200,000 YouTube subscribers and nearly 100,000 Twitch followers. We are obviously an English language media outlet, and Dave is a German content creator, so many of you listening may not have seen his videos because it's not in the language you speak. Some of you may have done though, and we thought it was a great idea to speak to him though, because having met him a couple of times at some recent events, I know his knowledge and passion is almost second to none. So do check out his channel if you understand what he's saying, but if not, we've got an English discussion here about what he thinks and what he'd like to see from F1 23 and also F1 Manager 2023. I should say that this was recorded before some recent announcements. So at the time, all we knew was the F1 Manager game was going to get a new game, and the EA Sports F1 23 had its Konnersport teaser reveal, and it had its initial trailer and press release and article details, but it hadn't had the deep dive on the red flags, how they worked, and the new physics, which is very interesting. We'll put a link in the description of this episode. And final thing before we get going, I should say, is if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below with any questions about Dave or opinions on Dave Gaming's content. They're really enigmatic, I think. But also your thoughts on what you'd like to see from the Formula 1 games in the future. But if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can't do that. But please do follow this podcast on there as well, because we don't put every episode on YouTube. It's only certain ones. But there are more episodes on the audio-only platforms. Okay, for now, Dave Gaming. Dave, it's a pleasure to speak to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Tom?
Yeah, really good. Thank you very much for joining us all the way in Germany. Obviously, I know you. We've met a few times at some events, which is, I think, with Gran Turismo and was one in particular. I saw you getting a signature from Kazunori there.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. But also, you know, you're a Twitch and YouTube content creator for racing games, and there are new Formula 1 games set to be announced. So what better time to speak to you about what's coming up? But before we talk about the new Formula 1 titles that are coming up, I'd like to talk to you about your passion outside of gaming. And you've talked to me many times about Ferrari and Formula 1. So is it Ferrari and Formula 1, first of all, that got you into gaming?
Funnily, it was a bit more McLaren Mercedes in first.
Was it?
I was a huge fan of the Finnish drivers, Mika Häkkinen first and then Kimi Räikkönen. And then Ferrari was more of a topic when Kimi Räikkönen won his one and only title with Ferrari in 2007. And from that point on, there was a love growing, and especially Formula 1 and also a bit Gran Turismo 1, they got me into gaming, as I always loved motorsport.
I noticed, well, we're going to primarily talk about Formula 1 games, but slight tangent. You know, you still use Gran Turismo menu music in some of your videos, right? So that's, before we jump to Formula 1, a bit ad hoc, but Gran Turismo is still something that you're deeply passionate about, right?
Absolutely, yes. Gran Turismo 3 is probably still one of the best racing games ever, and especially Gran Turismo 7 also made a nice step back to the classic Gran Turismo gameplay. I think in single player it is probably at some point still a bit outdated, but in multiplayer having a lot of fun.
Nice, yeah, with the sport mode and the lobbies, that's cool. So I was going back through your YouTube channel to the very first upload. I just watched that. No one enjoys who's got a YouTube channel, people watching their first one, right? For you, it's quite good because you don't talk on it, you're not on the camera. It's just a hot lap of Spa, and it's in F1 2014. What was it about that game that made you decide to upload to YouTube for the first time?
To be honest, the game was not that good, but
no, it wasn't.
after 2014 or in 2014, I finished my school, and before I went to university, I was like, well, I have some time left. I also bought my first PC, and I was like, well, maybe I can try out to record some videos. Probably it will be a bit successful, maybe. And I think also one of the first videos was quite successful because it was an F1 mod I installed. It was still for F1 2013. It came later than the F1 2014 video, but it was with Michael Schumacher, and yeah, it blew up a bit, and then I was like, well, I will just keep doing that, and probably I can make a living of that.
I see, yeah. I mean, over 9 years since those early days, those formative stages, let's say. And I think looking at your videos and streams, your style's evolved quite a bit. Mainly because people can see you now, which is a key thing. And yeah, I think the first videos you weren't really talking, and then for many years you did just like the gameplay with you talking, and it was not just racing games as well for a time. But now you've mainly focused on the racing games, and everybody gets to see your face. So talk me through your evolution and the decision to change up your style.
Yeah, at first I was a bit worried. What will people think when they see your face? And probably it's better to see your gameplay without your face. But at one point, you realize that with the face cam, it is so much more, so much easier to create content, because you can envoy so much emotions with just mimic, and also with how's it called, with facial expression, and also gestures, and that way it's I think it makes content creation much easier. And at first I didn't know which direction I would go to, but at one point I realized, well, I love motorsports, and also part of the gaming culture was a bit getting more boring for me, because there was pretty much no new innovation. And yeah, from one point on I was like, well, go niche, go big. And then I focused mainly on racing games. And I think that was quite a good decision, because yeah, imagine on my YouTube channel having Cyberpunk, The Last of Us, and all the indie games as well. I think if you're just interested in racing games, you're like, wow, how can I find myself, what videos I like here? And like this, it's much easier, I guess.
Go niche, go big. I love that. But I think that's true. I think especially on YouTube and Twitch, you have to find your niche, your genre, what you're really, really passionate about, and then the character comes through, doesn't it? And I think that's ultimately what people are subscribing and following for. And I just mentioned Twitch there. So obviously you've got over 200,000 YouTube subscribers, which is a fantastic figure. But you've also got nearly 90,000 Twitch followers as well. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, it always depends on what I prefer to do right now, because Twitch is a bit of a different content creation. You have the interaction with people, and from time to time I feel more like I want to interact with people, and sometimes I want to be for myself. And for those periods, it's much easier to create YouTube videos instead of going live streaming and having people having opinions and asking opinions, especially about what you think of Max Verstappen against Lewis Hamilton or whatever. And sometimes it's much easier to just isolate yourself from those topics.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, because it must be quite a difficult workload, actually, in some ways, to do a big, long Twitch stream and then have the motivation to then record and capture and edit for YouTube. Yeah, it's a different style between the two, isn't it? But you certainly seem to be managing that quite well at the minute, so you don't need me to say that. So let's just move on, if that's okay, from sort of the business, the content creation, if that makes sense, to the passion, specifically Formula One games. So I was watching an interview the other day where you were saying your first Formula One game was F1 97. If that's correct, what was the main appeal back then? Why did you start?
To be honest, I don't know if it was 97 or if it was the first Formula One game for PS1. I know I said 97, but to be honest, I was 2 or 3 years old when we had that game. I had two older brothers who had the PlayStation X or PlayStation 1. So I don't know what games we exactly had. I just know that I have a recording. I was 2.5 years old, and I was already sitting there with a gamepad in front of the screen. At first, I don't think I understood too much about what I was doing there, but I knew about F1, I knew about motorsport in general, and as things progressed, you learned a lot of things. You learned the racing line, you learned how to be quicker, you learned the racing tracks as well, and like that at one point you were informed, and that happened quite early for me. And I was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and I already knew a lot of rules. And this way I think Formula One just got in my life very, very early.
Oh, I see. So I didn't realize quite how young you were when you started playing the PlayStation. For me, I wasn't allowed one until I was 10 years old. So I missed.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. But
that's hard.
but I think my first F1 game was probably 2000, which was an EA game because there was a couple of different studios at the same time doing F1 games. Now we're in this era, since 2010 with Codemasters Birmingham studio developing the Formula One games. How's that journey been for you in those, we're up to the 14th title, I think, this year that they've created of the main series. 15 if you include Race Stars.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I know where you're going. I know, yeah. We covered it. And do you count the mobile game or not? I don't think we do, but because I think
did we count the
games.
Wii title?
Ah, yes,
ESPN
but wasn't
Wii.
that by Sumo Digital?
I don't know if it was just F1 2009, but I don't know if it was from Codemasters or not.
I think it was developed by a different studio, so I'm not counting it. But fair point. And there was a PS Vita. I digress. Of the main Codemasters developed games on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, and you can include Race Stars in there. Do you have a particular favorite?
I think F1 2017 has still a huge place in my heart.
Why that one?
Because the grip level was so amazing.
Okay.
That was coming from F1 2016, where you watched the qualifying laps in real life, and you were like, well, why can Nico Rosberg, I think of Singapore, for instance, you can floor the throttle on the exits, and if you just think about flooring the throttle in the video game, you just spin. And I was like, how is that not possible in a video game? And then the huge regulation changes came in, and from one year to another, they just changed the whole driving physics. So you could floor, for instance, in Melbourne, in the fast chicane in the third sector, you can go flat out so early. It's not even possible to do it like that in F1 2020, which I also like very much. And also 2018 is quite a good game. Yeah. But I think 2017 and 2020 are pretty much like my GOATs up to now.
Oh, okay, right. So it's that purple patch from 2017 when the rules changed in real life and they had more stability in the cars and more downforce. Yep. Interesting. Although 2020 is a good shout because for me personally, adding the My Team for the first time was a big boom, wasn't it? I suppose. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So it wasn't 2014, wasn't your favorite?
Not 2014, not 2015.
Are they all least favorite ones that they've created so far?
To be honest, I think some time has passed, so I don't know how I would judge them nowadays. Yeah. I think 2014 was really horrible. If you have a very objective perspective on that, I think that's pretty much the worst game of the series, because the driving physics were bad, the sound was so horrible, but also from a personal point of view, the most disappointing games for me were F1 21 and 22, because after 2019, when the F1 drivers had the feedback like the cars are not grippy enough, they don't have the turn in as they have in real life, they don't have the exit grip as they have in real life, I thought they would come over that level of missing grip. But as the regulation changes were explained for 2021 with the floor changes, there was a bit cut off. They had less downforce, but I think Codemasters just exaggerated how much less downforce you would have, and that also continued with F1 22. And I personally had the issue that I never really could predict when the car was about to spin, especially in fast corners in F1 21 and in F1 22, pretty much everywhere. You never know when the car is going to snap, and if it snaps, you cannot get back control of the car.
Yeah, well, let's touch upon F1 22, because as we speak, that's sort of the current game, because F1 23 isn't out until June. And it's been nearly a year of playing the 22 game. And what's your main takeaway from it? Is it that the handling was a bit, I don't know, unpredictable at times?
Yeah, I think they managed to do some cool things with F1 22. They had two tracks that was not in the calendar.
that's true.
China and Portimao. But I think a game stands and falls with the driving physics. If you don't have proper driving physics, then of course you can have the best multiplayer in the world, you can have the best AI in the world. If it is no fun to drive the actual car or the car in game, then force yourself to drive the car just to get that Formula One experience. And from time to time, it has been like I force myself to do that. I also had a few months of break with F1 21 and 22 as well, although it's my main video game I play on my channel. And all I hope for F1 23 is that they have better driving physics or a better handling model, and that you have a much more groupier car.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask next. I suppose is there, what can they do to improve things from the last game? And I suppose it's the driving experience for you that's the main thing, not so much the supercars and the My Team or the podium pass and stuff like this. It's more the driving experience, right?
If it was to me, they could remove like pretty much all the features apart from the Formula One part. They could remove supercars, F1 Live, also Formula 2. I don't really need Formula 2 in an F1 game. And all I wish for is that they make a roundup for the core of the game, so that they just get things right again, because some things have just diverged from how they have been. Like the development of the My Team career is way too fast, and the cars are becoming way too quick. Probably also a few changes, like how many sponsors can you place on the car, and where you can place them, and such things, and probably also different chassis parts that you can actually see, like a new rear wing or a new front wing when you upgrade the car.
Oh, so it looks different when you added the upgrades.
Yeah, that would be so amazing. I mean, even iRacing on the W12 at least, they have this feature that you can see differences in the front and rear wings, and that would be amazing. But first of all, the driving physics or the handling model has to change. Okay,
so very much then it's focusing on the core mechanics first and foremost, get those sorted, and then by all means tweak some other stuff. So, I mean, it's tricky when they're making a game, they need to try and have the big features to sell it to a bigger audience, but then also they need to appease those who play it week in, week out. And let's hope they focus on those first of all this time around. Well, speaking of the new game, there was recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Konnersport reveal, which I mistakenly took it as, they're going to reveal some information about the game, but they kind of didn't. What did you make to that reveal process, that teaser?
It was quite a nice idea to introduce a new team and also make it as a presentation like the real teams do. Was probably even better than a Red Bull presentation. I also like the color of the car, the whole look of the car. And I think that is the first part of how they introduce the story. And it would be also cool to have the car as the 11th team on the grid, and you with your My Team car can be like the 12th team on the grid. So you have 24 cars on the grid. That would be amazing. And the only part that was really weird was that it was a presentation in the middle of the season. They were talking about the first 3 races, how they were going, and on the other hand, they're like, well, that's the new competitor for 2023, and that was just strange.
Yeah, that was kind of fun to watch. I like the idea, but I just felt like it would be nice to get a few extra details at that point of the reveal about the game, because it ended with, and then more information is going to be in the first, and we got to the first, and it was, nope, the trailer's going to be on the third. And then on the third, we finally got some good information about the game.
Don't forget, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc also shared some information on Instagram and Twitter.
Oh, that's true. Yes, they did there because they're on the cover and they're involved in the marketing. Yep. Oh, how could I forget? So, although it is cool that real world drivers are involved in the promotion of the game. Just generally about Breaking Point, the story mode, which I suppose had its origins in 2019, but really was in F1 21 was the first time they properly went for it. Did you enjoy that game mode? And is that something you're looking forward to seeing coming back?
Yeah, it's definitely a nice to have. I don't think that sports games definitely need a story mode because
yeah.
you write your own stories. When you're 20 points behind in the championship, 3 races to go, and you just still win the world championship title, I think that's part of the story that you can imagine yourself. But having something with actors and more, I think it's a nice idea and also nice to have.
My personal opinion was I really enjoyed playing through it. I think choosing the right difficulty was key. If you had it too easy, you sort of lost some of the appeal of it. But yeah, as a one and done 3-4 hour thing, I thought it added something to the game. So as long as it doesn't take away from other elements of F1 23, I am looking forward to it. On the new game, they've mentioned a few things. Although, as at the time of recording, I've not driven it yet, just to be clear. But it sounds promising on paper. So they've talked about the potential for revised handling, which we've already discussed because that's one of the key things you'd like to see. But there are some other things. So, are red flags, in your opinion, or 35% races a big deal?
I think red flags are a big deal because in real life they are a big deal as well.
Right,
I don't like how they're used in real life because a standing start with 2 or 3 laps to go is just too much of a lottery. It
was a bit weird in Australia this year, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and also in Baku 2 years ago. And I personally don't need that. A flying restart would be better, a rolling restart, like in the second half of the race. For the first half, you can probably keep it, but apart from that, I think red flags are a big thing and also can bring a bit more spice in the racing action. And also the 35% race is quite cool. I recently just learned to respect and enjoy the 25% races because it feels like a way more compressed experience, but it doesn't take away any of the fun. It is still very fun to drive, and I feel like the 50% race, at one point everything settles where it is, and there are just only tiny steps forward or backwards, and I think 35% is a nice compromise for that.
Yeah, we'll have to see how these play out. But certainly red flags, for me, I know it's been a requested feature because I think the last time it appeared was F1 2014. That's something they got right. But yes, it's how they're implemented, and we'll have to see how they come into being. But in the modern era of Formula One, it seems to be in the real world, they might become more of a thing. So it's important to try and replicate that, isn't it? And speaking of new things, I mean, I've not really seen the track yet, but are you looking forward to driving Las Vegas, which will be available alongside Qatar from launch this time around?
I played it in Assetto Corsa. There was a modification, and
yes.
I don't think that it's the most special track in terms of the layout, but the surroundings are very interesting, and I think I'm looking forward to see it with a very nice graphics, and especially the lighting. I think in Formula One games has improved a lot, and yeah, let's see. I think it will definitely be a pleasure to drive there just to see the surroundings.
And just nipping back, actually, while I think about it, of the red flag debate, that was something that was in F1 Manager 2022 last year, the first one for Frontier Developments. I know you've done a big Let's Play series of that game, although it's in German, so apologies, I'm ignorant. I don't really understand what you're saying. Is that also something you're looking forward to, like a new F1 Manager title this year?
Yeah, it depends on how much they change from the previous game, because...
What would you like to see change then?
At the moment, there's a meta where you just drive in the DRS train. You just try to stay in the DRS train. You save tires, fuel, and ERS. And I feel like also for F1 esports, it might make things more interesting if you give people just a reason to overtake someone else. And if you're the following car and you lose, like, depending on the track, maybe 10 or 20 or up to 50 or 60% more of your tires, if you have 20 to 60% more tire wear, then you definitely have a reason to overtake the car ahead. So you are the car ahead. He can probably save a bit of ERS, but then he will destroy his tires right behind you. And I think the main problem is there is a meta at the moment for the development part and also on track. For the development part, you can make the intense development for the current season parts, and that's pretty much overpowered. And on track, whenever you are in the DRS train, you can save your tires, fuel, and ERS. And I think they need to give you a bit more variance, a bit more variety. It might be worth it to be driving in the DRS train, and where it might not be worthy. Also for F1 esports, that might be a positive if you just increase the tire wear when you're in the DRS train for, depending on the track, in Monza maybe for 10% more tire wear, in Suzuka with all the S turns maybe 50% more tire wear would be adequate. That way you would have also sometimes a reason to overtake another car and try to be the leader of the pack. And this way you have to approach all the races quite a bit differently, and I think that would make things more interesting. I think right now you can approach all the F1 Manager 22 races the same way. If they change that, if they could just break the things as they are right now, that would be way more interesting.
It's a similar critique actually to what you were saying about the F1 game. You're more focused on, okay, I want this to work better on the track. I want this race track to be more realistic. Whereas I suppose some other people might say, well, we need to be able to manage the F2 teams as well, or we want to have online multiplayer in leagues and stuff. But I suppose getting it right on track, first of all, is key. I just suppose generally about the F1 Manager game, though, do you welcome the fact that there's now two games that they are slightly different, one's driving, one isn't, but they're sort of competing and they might push each other forward, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I think before the Manager game was released, there was quite a lot of harsh critique against Codemasters and EA. That's the way you develop a proper Formula One game, and have a look at how the graphics are. I think in hindsight, we can accept that both games have their own audience, their own direction. And for me personally, who loves the sport, who's a fan of the sport, I just love the fact that you have both games. And yeah, when you're probably finished with your league racing on an evening, you can then try to calm down a bit with one race and F1 Manager.
Right. Oh, I see. Nice. And I suppose it also helps for, if you have a YouTube channel, Twitch, that's mainly known for Formula One games, you've got two titles to create content with now, which is a win for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's just touch upon not just so much this year, but like the future of the Formula One games. They've been using a variant, the driving games that is, of the Ego engine now since F1 2010. Although I'm sure it's revised and heavily updated each year, and probably there isn't a single line of code from that first game in the current ones. But do you think it's time for maybe next year or year after a different game engine, or is that a risk?
I'm not much into that technical side of game development, so I don't know if it is the problem with the game engine, because there have been some bugs around for like multiple years now. And if those things are directly connected to the game engine, then I think at one point you should definitely step to another engine, because I also feel like having the desyncs in the multiplayer, for instance, that's not something that is adequate for an official F1 licensed game. So I hope that they can kind of sort out how the game is built from like the IT side, and probably changing the game engine and building everything up from the ground might help to avoid some things that are now probably just a bit faulty.
Yeah, I suppose. Oh, that was my thinking of the question. It's kind of a leading question, so apologies. But then at the same time, they might have to start from scratch from certain things. They have to release a game still on a yearly basis. What if the first one comes out and it's a buggy mess? So I know. I think we're at a crossroads, though. I think it's an interesting time, and we'll have to see what happens in the future. But for now, still looking forward to F1 23. And in the F1 games, let's start with the F1 driving game. Is there one feature that's not already been included that you'd like to see in a new F1 game?
That's a good question. One feature, I think you'll like this one.
Okay. All right.
Having variable track limits, where you can decide in an online race where the track limits actually are. Like,
oh, okay.
You're like, well, we are very strict in Blanchiment, but at the bus stop chicane, you can like completely ignore the track limits on the exit. I think this way you can also make league racing more interesting, because you always have to adapt to different track limits.
That would be wild. I don't think any game, to my knowledge, has been able to have it where the host, let's say, can change the track limits. But certainly there are times in some of the recent F1 games where you do question some of the track limits, right? And you think, why does that match real life? I'm not sure it does. Mind you, the FAA has got its own challenges with track limits as well, hasn't it? So it's a very tricky thing to work out. But yeah, I mean, maybe something like a Assetto Corsa Competizione where it has the track limits, but sometimes can be quite lenient as well, where it says, you didn't really gain much time, so we'll let you off. Moving away from the F1 games, just quickly to finish off here, I just want to talk about Dave again. That's all right. What's next for you? What's going on in your life this year?
I'm looking forward for a few game releases, and I'm also planning to buy a new car.
And does that car have a prancing horse on the bonnet? Because when you told me this, I didn't believe you. I thought you were joking.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm still not... I still haven't finally decided on what car it will be.
Yeah.
I have huge plans for the car. I don't know if I can tell them yet publicly. But I went from the 458 to 488, F8, and probably also thinking about the Pista. It also depends on how the circumstances are. I will see what car it will be.
Interesting. So either way, it's an upgrade from the Opel Corsa.
Yes.
Which I'm not knocking the Corsa, but it's a bit of a gap, a delta between that and a Ferrari potentially.
Also in terms of fuel consumption, times 3 probably.
Yeah. Well, best get making those videos, Dave. Someone needs to pay the bills. So, thank you very much for your time, Dave. In the words of Charles Leclerc, Dave Gaming, he's quick. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and hope the new F1 games are to your liking and you can make some more content for the German listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tom. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for listening and watching to our interview with Dave Gaming about the future of the Formula 1 driving games and what he'd like to see in the near and long term. I hope you enjoyed that, but thank you also to Dave for his time. He's well worth a follow or a subscribe if German is your chosen language. We hope to speak to him again in the future too. Don't forget, if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please rate, review and subscribe. That really helps out the show. Don't forget, we've got some affiliate links for sim racing hardware and equipment in the description. And on YouTube, leave a comment and subscribe. That helps us out there too. We'll be back for some new episodes of the TraxionGG podcast very soon. Keep it pinned.